Hi, my name is Ava Lorette. I'm 28 years old. I live in Maine, and I don't believe in ghosts. Or I did until I moved into Berlin. House with rent was cheap to cheap, and when I asked the realtor why, she gave the awkward chuckle people use when they're avoiding something. It's just an old house, creepy to some, nothing more. She was wrong. First night, I heard the walls whisper my name, not loudly, not in the boo way you'd expect from a haunted house story. It was gentler, almost loving, like someone brushing your ear with their lips and breathing. Ava, I turned on every light. Nothing, no sign of anyone, no sounds outside yet. Then I noticed something strange about the layout. The house had one more room than was listed. A narrow wooden door behind a sliding bookshelf, no handle, just carvings round the edge, small scratched symbols worn away like something had tried to claw of it at night. I had a dreamy was standing in that hidden room. It was pitch black, except for a mirror leaning against the far wall. In the reflection, I wasn't alone. A shadow stood behind me, tall and bent, fingers long enough to rest on my shoulders. Without moving, he turned. In the dream, no one was there. Ray turned back to the mirror, and it whispered, "You're home." I woke up screaming. There were scratches on my bedroom wall exactly like the ones carved on the hidden door, and the whisper came again from inside the house, this time from inside my head. "Welcome back, Ava, back. I've never been here before, have I?" The next morning, I tried to convince myself it was all just exhaustion, new house stress, a vivid dream, maybe leftover trauma I hadn't unpacked yet. But I couldn't ignore the fact that the scratches on my wall matched the ones on the hidden door. I stood in front of that narrow handleless door for what felt like hours. It wasn't locked, but it didn't open either. It just stood there, stubborn, sealed, and breathing. I could swear I heard faint breathing from the other side, slow, measured, matching mine. And then I saw it, a thin slit in the wood near the bottom, like a mail slot sealed shut. I pressed my fingers to it, warm, not the cold of old wood or rusted metal, skin warm. Later the afternoon, I left to clear my head. I drove to the coast, set near the water, trying to remember why I had even come here in the first place. I didn't know anyone in Maine. I had no ties. Just a feeling like something had drawn me here. The ad for the house had appeared in my email, even though I'd never searched for it. It had said one word in the subject line: ready? That evening, when I returned, the hidden door was open, just slight lino to let out a draft, and the smell of old cedar, burnt paper, and something else, something metallic. I pushed it open. No light switch, just a long, narrow room with shelves built into the wall and a wooden desk pressed against the far end. A single object sat in the center of the desk, a diary, faded leather cover, torn strap, my initials burned into the corner. Ali picked it up with trembling hands and flipped through the first few pages. The handwriting was mine, every loop, every messy, every anxious slant. But the entries were dated 10 years ago, back when I was 18, living in New Jersey, far from this house. The first page said, "Today I came back to Berlin. It feels like I never left." The next page was worse. "The house knows my name, but it's waiting for me to remember its name." And then a page that had been torn out violently, followed by a single sentence written in red ink, different from the rest: "Don't trust the mirror. It's not a reflection, it's a doorway." I dropped the diary, and from behind me, just past the cracked hidden door, a low voice whispered, "Ava." I ran out of the room, out of the house, into the street, barefoot. I didn't care. I stood under the street lamp for half an hour, trying to stop shaking. I called Laura, my older sister, someone I hadn't spoken to in years. She didn't answer. But when I hung up, I got a text: "You shouldn't have opened it. No name, no number." Barry turned back toward the house, and the lights in the attic window were on bed. I hadn't been up the right. He didn't sleep that night. I sat on the couch with every light in the house on, a kitchen knife clutched in my hand like a child gripping a nightlight. But lights don't stop the kind of darkness I'm dealing with, not when it lives in walls, not when it knows your name. The attic light stayed on all night, flickering sometimes like someone pacing just out of sight. I told myself I wouldn't go up there, that I'd leave, break the lease, burn the place down if I had to. But when morning came, something pulled me, not just curiosity, something deeper, like gravity, but personal, like the house was saying, "It's time." The attic stairs were narrow, steep, and dust-covered. Each creak sounded deliberate, like footsteps. Sick hoeing my own. The closer I got to the top, the colder the air became not natural cold, but dead cold, the kind of chill that clings to your spine and whispers things you don't want to hear. When I reached the top, I hesitated, my hand hovered over the old brass doorknob. It was already warm inside. The attic was wrong, not messy, not haunted the way movies show it. It was clean, organized, lived in like someone had been using it, just not me. Single mirror stood at the far end, full length, framed in dark wood, covered by a sheer cloth. But I could already see the outline of a figure beneath it. He stepped closer and the cloth shifted, not from wind, from inside. I yanked it down, and for that mirror didn't show my reflection. It showed the attic, same angle, same room, but with someone else standing behind me, a tall veiled woman in an old-fashioned black dress, face obscured, still as death. Her hands rested on my shoulders in the mirror, but I felt nothing. He turned around. No one there. Turned back to the mirror. She was gone. A bit something else had appeared, scratched into the glass like fingernails dragged across the surface. Eva, do you remember what you promised me? I backed away and suddenly the attic door slammed shut. Light bulb above flickered violently and shattered, plunging the room into dim morning light from the window. Was locked and the mirror pulsed. Then something stepped out, not physically, not fully, but a hand, pale, delicate, crawled across the inside of the glass, searching, feeling, reaching it, and I swear I heard it sigh. Still not ready. Then it disappeared. The attic door unlocked by itself. He stumbled down the stairs, diary in hand, heart racing like thunder, trapped in a cage. But the diary felt heavier now. I opened it again. A new page had appeared. The attic mirror is just the first. The real one is buried beneath the house, the one that shows you what you gave up to live. And at the bottom of the page, a sketch of me sleeping. Bit in the sketch, I had no eyes. He couldn't stay in the house another second. I left everything, the diary, my phone, even my shoes, and drove straight to the county records office. I didn't know what I was looking for, maybe just proof that the house didn't always feel like it was breathing, maybe the name of someone who died there, or a tragic history I could explain away with logic and loss. I told the clerk I was researching the Verlin property on Hollow Pike Road. Her face shifted instantly, like I'd mentioned a dead relative. She nodded slowly and disappeared into a back room for nearly 20 minutes. When she returned, she handed me a dusty brown file with frayed corners and faded ink. The label on the front simply said, Verlin Estate 189. For inside were brittle pages, blueprints, property transfers, newspaper clippings. Then I saw it, a black and white photo of family standing on the porch of the house, man, woman, 3 children, and the little girl, maybe 8 or 9, had a name scribbled in fountain pen underneath. Ava Lorette. I stared at it for what felt like forever. It wasn't just the Nimesh looked exactly like Mesame, long jawlines, same wide set eyes, even the same scar above the eyebrow I got from falling off a bike when I was 12. It didn't make sense to me. Hands shook as I flipped through more. Jessie found her name again. Ava Lorette, listed in the town census from 1901 under deceased, died at age 28, cause of death locked in lower mirror cellar, presumed accident, body never recovered. Lower mirror cellar. There was no mention of a cellar in the 4 plans I was given when I moved in, but the file included a hand-drawn map, an old one with a stairwell marked behind the kitchen, beneath the tiled pantry. That night, I returned to the house. Everything felt heavier, like the air was holding its breath. He moved the pantry shelves, tore up the tiles, and there it was, just like the drawing. A rusted ring set into a square slab. I pulled it open with a shriek, loud enough to make my ears ring. A staircase led downward into darkness. The walls were lined with tiny circular mirrors, like eyes watching, all cracked, all tilted slightly downward, as if ashamed. There was colder than the attic at the end of the staircase was a door smaller than the others, made of old black wood carved with looping symbols. It opened without touching. Inside was a single thing, a mirror, not modern, not clean, ancient, wide as the wall, its frame made of bone, white wood twisted like veins. But this one didn't show. Might showed hair. Ava Lorette, the same black dress the attic woman wore, standing in the room, but she wasn't in the mirror. She was behind me, turned slowly, no fingered back to the glass. She was smiling, no, holding something in her hand. Her diary, me diary, and across her throat were carved the words, "One of us must return." I don't remember walking back upstairs in a minute. I was standing in front of the mirror in the cellar staring at the reflection of a woman who wore my face a century too early. The next, I was sitting at the kitchen table, hands trembling, my heart pounding like it wanted out of my chest. But the worst part wasn't the fear, it was the fact that I wasn't afraid. I felt familiar, like I had stood in that mirror room before, just not in this life. To me that night I didn't dream. Instead, I woke up in a memory, was sitting on a wooden floor in a white nightgown. No electricity, candlelight flickering across wallpaper I didn't recognize. But I knew the scent: cedar, dust, something old and something wet. There was crying from upstairs, and a child, a mother's voice humming through the wall. Then footsteps, heavy ones, someone moving down the hallway slowly, like they were dragging something. She turned in the dream, or maybe the memory, and saw myself as a child, maybe 7 or 8. I was holding the same diary, only the pages weren't empty this time. They were written in blood. He tried to scream, but no sound came. A child version of me turned her head and said, without moving her lips, "She's not gone, Ava, you're just late coming back." Then the walls began to bleed, the candle went out, and I woke up gasping for air. There was dirt under my fingernails and a new page in the diary on my nightstand. She remembers now. The house didn't trap her, it waited, it whispered for decades, until she found her way back, until she could finish what she started below. That was a sketch of a key I'd never seen before, silver thin, old, raw, next to a familiar door. The narrow wooden one behind the bookshelf that first led me to the diary, that now it was closed again. When I approached it, the carving had changed. Before, the scratches were random, now they formed a phrase. "Debt unpaid is blood remembered." I placed my hand on the wood, it pulsed beneath my fingers, slow like a heartbeat. He whispered, "What do you want from me?" And from behind the door, a voice I recognized, my own, answered, "To come back." Completely, the house didn't just want me to remember, it wanted me to become her again. And the scariest part, somewhere deep down, he wanted to. He didn't leave the house again. After that night, something in me had shifted, not broken, just turned. I stopped looking at the mirror as a threat and started listening to it. The more I stood near it, the more the voices made sense. They no longer whispered random warnings or names. Now they spoke in rhythm, in memory. They told stories, my stories. Childhood moments I had forgotten. A night when I sleepwalked into my mother's closet at age 10, the time I broke my wrist falling off a tire swing. But they described it in eerie detail, down to the thoughts I had in those moments, thoughts I'd never spoken aloud. The house wasn't guessing, it knew me. Every version of Methan. I heard a name I hadn't heard. Indicatus. Miriam's voice whispered it. Well, I sat in front of the cellar mirror again, eyes locked with the version of myself that now paced behind the glass. Miriam was my imaginary friend. When I was 7 or so, I thought I remembered drawing pictures of her with long black hair and dark eyes and saying she lived in the floor. My parents thought it was just a face, but now the reflection mouthed the name as I sat there. Miriam remembers. The diary added a new page and prompted. The ink was still wet when I turned to it. She was never imaginary, she was the first. "You were the last, you brought her back." I stood and backed away from the mirror, and that's when the floor groaned beneath men at the usual wooden creak. It was different, like something breathing out after holding its lungs too long. Then the walls shuddered all at once. Books fell from shelves, glasses shattered in the sink, and every mirror in the house, from the bathroom to the attic to the one above the kitchen sink, began to fog, not from heat, but from something exhaling through them. I ran to the mirror cellar. The large mirror at the far wall no longer showed a reflection, or a version of might showed the house from the outside, and a woman was standing on the porch. Miriam, older now, wearing the same black dress, her face twisted into something both pitiful and terrifying. She wasn't just a memory or a ghost, she was the part of me that never grew up, the part that stayed inside this place long before I ever returned it. And now she wanted out. The diary burned in my hands, her new line scorched its elf across the final page. "Either she takes your place or you take hers." The air inside the room became thick, heavy, humming like it was alive, because it waste house wasn't haunted, it was hungry, and the only thing it had ever truly wanted was me. I don't remember making the decision. Maybe it wasn't a decision at all. Maybe it had already been made long before I ever walked back in a Berlin house, long before I answered that mysterious email, before I opened that diary. Before I listened to the whispers, maybe the house had always known how this would end. The moment I stepped into the cellar for the final time, something in the air changed, not heavier this time, calmer, like the house had finally stopped holding its breath. The mirrors weren't fogged anymore, they were still, silent, and in the largest one at the far end, both versions of me stood side by side, Ava in black, Ava in white, me, and the woman I might have been, or the one I left behind. Miriam stood behind them. She didn't look angry, she looked tired. Her voice, when it came, was so gentle I almost leaned into it. The house remembers those who forget themselves. That was the trade. I stepped closer to the mirror, watching both versions of myself reflect emotions I couldn't even name: fear, relief, longing. The diary fell open in my hand. Without me touching it, one last sentence burned itself into the page. Only one may return, the other must remain. Balance must be kept. I closed my eyes and chose. I reached forward, not to the version of me in white, the one who was afraid and searching, but to the one in black, the one who had stayed, learned, remembered everything, the one who had become part of the house. I touched her hand in the glass, and she smiled, not wickedly, not like a demon or a ghost. Smiled like she'd been waiting. Mirror pulsed, and for the briefest second, I felt myself split, not break, just a video. When half stepped into the glass, others stepped out. I don't remember which parts stayed behind, but I remember standing on the porch later that morning, watching the sunrise, holding the diary. Now blanker couple walked past, looking at the for sale sign outside. The Kativ woman smiled at me. Lovely old place, you live here? I nodded yes, just moved in. And as they kept walking, I turned back toward the door. The house welcomed me home that night. I looked in the bathroom mirror, reflection blinked at the same time, moved at the same time, smiled at the same time. But something deep in my gut told me it wasn't me anymore. Reed was the version that stayed and the version that returned. She's waiting inside the walls for the next girl who thinks she found a cheap house, with history written and edited by Dark Life Side Diaries. Yes, thank you for joining Ava's journey through the house that whispers my numb me. If this story chilled your bones or made you glance over your shoulder tonight, like, share, and subscribe to support more original horror. Drop a comment. What would you have done in Ava's place? Would you have stayed or left someone else behind? Because remember, sometimes the scariest thing you'll ever see is your own face smiling back at you from the wrong side of the mirror.